Joining me now from Tel Aviv is Yoram Schweitzer. He's a former head of the Israeli military's counter-terrorism section and also an expert at the Israeli Institute for National Security Studies. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, as an Israeli citizen and a counter-terrorism expert, what were the first thoughts that came to your and your colleagues' mind when you saw those Brussels attacks unfolding?
That unfortunately what was expected happened. I don't think it was strategically a surprise because we anticipated, we thought, we saw that the Islamic State has been preparing an international terror squads. They declared about it, they talked about it, the personalities themselves threatened to do it, and now it happened again after the Paris attacks.
What's your assessment of the effectiveness of the Belgian and European intelligence agencies in fighting these terrorist cells?
I'm sure that the capabilities are there. I think that the European security services, the intelligence corps in Europe have proven that they can fight a challenge, a security challenge, while they basically defunct most of the Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda affiliated attempts during the last decade. Now they are facing ISIS, the Islamic State, and they will probably be able to curtail most of its activities. Some of it will probably be executed.
Now, the perceived intelligence failures around the Brussels attacks are to many more than worrying. What do you think went wrong? Do you think these attacks could have been prevented?
I think there was probably some malfunctions and some failures that cost dearly, and it should be checked. That's part of the drill of fighting terrorism. Not everything is going to be successful, not all the operations would be intercepted. There must be a serious, as always, after a failure, there must be a serious checkup of what went wrong. I'm sure that they will do it, by the way, also when there are successes in intercepting such operations. Lessons should be learned, and I'm sure that they will do it.
Now, we've heard that Turkey had picked up one of the bombers and deported him to Europe, where he was released. Do you think this was a missed chance to stop the Brussels attacks and possibly those Paris attacks that we saw last year?
We have to remember, these two brothers were basically criminals, not a known terrorist that were missed in the scrutiny of the police or intelligence sources. If we were talking about someone who specifically was extradited from Turkey to the hands of the Belgian authority, and they would have been notified or had been notified, that's a major goof. But I'm not sure this was the case. I don't know enough details, we don't know enough details about the failure. I'm sure that the security services will check themselves, maybe some others will check them and will learn about it. Of course, it wasn't a success.
Now, a latest security assessment says that ISIL sent at least 400 attackers to Europe, working in cells, and also scores of European fighters have returned to their countries. Realistically, do you think the intelligence agencies can monitor all suspects?
Let me first connect you to the first question that you asked. We know that the IS has prepared depots, cadres of Europeans. They didn't qualify these few thousand Europeans just to be suicide bombers or cannon fodder in Iraq and Syria. They used them and planned it in order to operate them abroad. Now the numbers that are being mentioned, like 400, it may be 400, it may be more. This is a challenge that we have to anticipate that it would occur. Now, I think that security services, with the backing of the prime ministers, the leadership in those countries, should prepare for it, should allocate resources, should increase immensely the manpower, qualified manpower of the intelligence corps, of the police, and they would be able eventually to curtail and to fight this challenge. It had been done and it would be done, but sometimes it may be, unfortunately, failures in intercepting these kind of activities. But this is a challenge that can be met and should be met.
At the same time, it seems European countries are now breeding grounds for terrorism. Molenbeek, the district of Brussels, for example, has been dubbed by some as jihadi central. What do you think it actually takes to penetrate these networks?
I think that no country should allow certain neighborhoods to be a source of crime or a source of terrorism. but it should be done very carefully, because the heart, the basic part of the basic trick of terrorism is to try to solicit much harsher and indiscriminate response towards population. I think that police forces should get into problematic neighborhoods and take care of those who are prone or involved in terrorism, but let the others live and basically even be assisted by the neighborhood and neighbors who would defy these kind of operations by these gentlemen in the Molenbeek and other places.
Now, one of the Brussels attacks obviously happened at the city's international airport. How do you think Europe can address the need to increase security at our airports with the current way of life that we have?
Yes, that's a challenge. I think it should be based on intelligence, on professional people who are working in the airports and knows their job, how to scrutinize those who are suspected. There must be a better circles of security, because we know airports had been in the past, it's not a new phenomenon, and now are part of the soft targets that IS and others, by the way Al-Qaeda is still there, are looking for in order to use this Achilles heel to attack the West.
Now, Europe has been facing criticism over its transport security in light of the attacks we saw this week. At some airports elsewhere, passengers are stopped before they even get into the terminal. Their baggage is screened and their documents are checked. Do you think that's something we should be doing here in Europe?
When I visited Europe, I saw that there are security arrangements. They must be tightened, they must be improved, they must be very focused. And the trick is to try to let the people move as freely as they can, not to interrupt and not to disrupt the freedom of movement, but then to be prepared for suspected people who are intending to carry out terrorist attacks. We are doing it in Israel for a long time. Israel is relatively small. By the way, there are countries in Europe that are small, and it needs to be, the principle needs to be adapted to the circumstances, to the conditions in the European airports. But we must not capitulate and totally turn upside down our way of life in Europe and other places as well. It is an issue. It has been an issue. By the way, you have to remember, airports were under constant attacks in the 70s, and at least half part of the 80s. This is not a new phenomenon. And European countries adapted and improved their security preparedness, and it went away. It should be done, it will be done, and eventually it can safeguard the citizens of Europe as well as foreigners who are visiting there.
Now, following the attacks in Brussels, Israel has offered Belgium its assistance by sending security experts to help. Where do you think they would start, and what would be the main advice they would give? And how long will it take, do you think?
First of all, it's not. I wouldn't recommend to measure it in times. This is an ongoing challenge. I would say that the first thing is that the Europeans should do is to inhale the fact that they are under attack. It shouldn't be a surprise. It had to be prepared for quite a long time. I'm sure that countries like the United Kingdom and probably France, after the attack, even before the attack, and Germany and Italy and Scandinavian countries are preparing themselves for this. It should be a coordinated, concerted effort by the local intelligence organizations, among themselves and among the European countries, and with the assistance of others who have the expertise in order to prepare themselves for this challenge. But it can be met.
So in light of the Brussels attacks and also the attacks that we saw in Paris last year, do you think this is all a wake-up call for Europe?
It should have been a wake-up call a long time ago. I hope now that it's sunk in the minds of those who are responsible for allocating the resources, and definitely I'm sure that the intelligence services in Europe have already gotten this and didn't need any wake-up call.
Yoram Schweitzer in Tel Aviv, thank you for speaking to us.